Hello, good evening, everyone, or good morning if you're on the other side of the world. Welcome to Monk Chat with the resident monks here at Empty Cloud and the resident kitty. Show you his little tail. No, doesn't. The paw. Okay, let's do this. Hello! Little stand cameo. He didn't like that. All right, welcome to Gita, Mark, AP, our other Gita number 2 or number 1, depending on which one appears first. And Ned, hello, Jens, Melinda, good to see you, Andre, John, and Eleanor. And I am Aya Soma, for those who don't know me. And to my right is Bhante Sudazo, to my further right, Bhante Sumano, and to my left, Bhante Pamutto. And we also have another Bhante that will soon also come here, but we won't disclose who it is. You'll have to tune in next week to discover who is the new Bhante that is currently social distancing here at Empty Cloud Monastery. Welcome also to Eleanor. So for those who are not familiar with Monk Chat yet, how it works is that you can ask any questions that you like and type them in the live chat, and we will try our best to answer them. So since the live chat is empty for now,
I guess that's it for Monk Chat.
Thanks for joining us,
and we'll see you next time.
Oh, well, Jens says, not a question, but thank you, Aya. Your talk on conspiracy theories and right speech helped me in an unexpected conversation I had the other day. Oh, sadhu. I'm very happy to hear.
You gave a talk
it
on
was
conspiracy
helpful.
theories?
Well, actually, I had asked our friend Adriana, who is kindly taking care of scheduling us. I had not asked. I had suggested that was something that I wanted to talk about in the future, meaning I wanted to contemplate it for a while. But then she scheduled it the next day. So we might have part 2, conspiracy theories part 2, perhaps with all the other venerables who can share their thoughts and ideas on conspiracy theories. Since there are a lot of conspiracy theories, we might as well have different perspectives on the subject matter.
It's also very nice. It was actually, I sensed mostly about truth, and it came right after the debate.
Yes.
Right before the debate, I forget which.
Yes, it was an interesting timing. Perhaps that's why she scheduled it right there. All right, welcome to Liz. And John says, I'm still clapping after the sharing yesterday. You all did a lovely job with that event. Aww. And Ned is asking, do dreams have any significance in Buddhism? Who is one of the venerables volunteering to talk about dreams? No one is volunteering. So I'll voluntold. I think Bhante Sumana has spoken about it. Have you spoken about it?
Dreams?
Okay, perfect. So do you want to talk about dreams right now?
Sure. Well, interestingly enough, I don't dream that often personally. I usually fall asleep and then seemingly wake up 8 hours later or whatever. So for me, and from at least my practice, dreams haven't had much significance in the way of using a dream in a sort of, useful way. But one thing that I have found is that dreams are or can be indicative of your state of mind, just in general. So rather than using it as, say, a way to predict something or to maybe find answers to things, I often see dreams as more reflections of what's moving through the mind. And moving through the mind...
I don't know what I did. Oh, here.
Moving through the mind subconsciously sometimes. So, for example, the Buddha refers to dreams when he talks about the practice of loving kindness. So loving kindness, when practiced and developed, helps someone have a wholesome and light and happy mind. And when you have a happy, wholesome, and light mind, then you have good dreams, or you don't have nightmares at least. So when nightmares do happen, sometimes it's like, oh, okay, well, what's going on in life right now that might be triggering that? Stress dreams are pretty common, maybe stress nightmares. So you can use those to see also, well, if there's something that's nagging at you in your personal life, or maybe just in the world, those things can sort of come up once the mind has the sort of unrestricted nature that it can take on when you're asleep. So you're not actively able to suppress what's going on. And so it might come in a dream. So yeah, I would use dreams more as a way to sort of see what you might be dealing with on a subconscious level, but not so much in the way of using it as something too helpful for your practice. Yeah, I don't know much about dreams, to be honest.
Great. Thank you, Bante. And Eleanor is asking, are there things from your lay life that you miss? So maybe we can go from Bante Pamuto all the way to Bante Sumano, and we can all respond to that. Anything that you miss from your lay life?
Well, I was just back there for a little while. It was not, no. No, I came back, and pretty much as soon as I was healthy enough to do so, I found what I ended up missing the opportunity to do so many good things and associate with so many good people so regularly as at the monastery and being a monastic. So when I got back to lay life, it went the other direction.
Great. Well, it's kind of interesting, but both times, so the first time when I took samaneri ordination, and now that I've taken bhikkhuni ordination, a few persistent thoughts started appearing in my mind, which it's actually quite interesting. As soon as I took samaneri ordination, even though I had never had any sort of thoughts of sensual desire in meditation, at a certain point, I was constantly, I had constant thoughts of croissants appearing in my mind, and just random cravings that appeared right after I got in robes. And I remember thinking, wow, I kind of dumbed down my meditation, my mind, that I am having such silly sort of thoughts, but so full of craving. And the same exact thing started happening in the past week. But I actually laugh about it a lot. At the very beginning, I was taking it almost seriously, going oh, wow, now I can't buy a croissant for the rest of my life because I don't have any money and I can't handle money. That's horrible. It's awful.
So if somebody wants to bring croissants to the monastery, it sounds like that might be appreciated.
The thing is, you get croissants pretty regularly. It's not like she's never going to eat a croissant. It's just she can't choose anymore.
Yes, exactly. It was the choosing part. But also,
she's not even that fond of croissants.
It's true, exactly.
She's always honest.
Well, they clearly know a lot about.
I mean, the last time somebody brought a croissant, she had a little bit and then she gave the rest to somebody else.
But point being was that actually I told Bante, I remember telling Bante Sudazo straight away about these odd cravings that were appearing in meditation. And I remember him saying, oh, yes, it's a very well-known fact that Mara comes and tempts you right after you take vows in order to lure you in. Although, I mean, he wasn't particularly skillful. He isn't particularly skillful because,
croissants, really?
Yeah, I can do better than that. But anyway, both times, so in the past and currently, I'm like, Mara, I see you. Ah, that's Mara. And then whatever craving sort of starts disappearing and disintegrating. Bante?
No. Bante Sumino?
What was the question?
Anything you missed from your lay life?
I don't think there are any things like objects that I miss. I was never really attached to those things in the first place. I think lately I've missed my friends to some extent. That's kind of changed a lot anyway with the pandemic for a lot of people. But when you choose to live in a monastery, obviously you're choosing to give up sort of the freedom to just go and come and go as you wish. So that means that certain relationships have to change in terms of the dynamic, and a lot of times people have to come here. So that doesn't really happen necessarily that often. So it's sort of like, I used to see certain people pretty often, and now I don't anymore. So working with that.
All right, thank you. And Gita is asking, can you elaborate on the concept of seeing things as they really are? Is this anicca, dukkha, anatta? Bhante Sudasa, would you like to share?
So seeing things as they really are, I think the best way of relating to that is seeing things without any filtration or interpretation, but just relating to the experience on its own terms. So not adding a story to the experience, not rewriting the experience, but just relating to exactly what's happening without projecting anything onto it or without expecting it to be any particular way, without ignoring any part of it. So since things are themselves anicca, dukkha, anatta, then that is something which can naturally come as a result of it. But fundamentally, it's just it's seeing your experience without projection, without filtration, without distortion. It's fundamentally what it is.
Great, thank you. And Robin is asking, could you say a little bit about the practice of dedication of merit? How does it work, and how do you do it?
The practice of dedication of merit is very beloved in the Theravada tradition, and it's because we generate so much merit in our practice, and there's this sense that the Arhat path, we're also selfish. We're about trying to get things for ourselves, and it's come up in our conversation just today. But the reality is, we're interdependent, and the moment we start doing good things, our mind almost immediately starts thinking of our friends and our family, and it's like, how can I share this goodness? I can't wait to tell them I've discovered this thing that's helping bring happiness into my life. And so the idea of dedication of merit is giving words, giving a formula, actually letting you vocalize that instead of calling people up and like, you have to read this Dhamma book, you have to see this Dhamma talk. And people are like, okay, no, I want to see a movie. I don't want to see a Dhamma talk. But instead you just, you voice this intention, like, may you be able to share in the goodness of my life. And it's just that simple, as you're not putting an object on it. You're just saying, I open up the goodness of my practice, and you may take what you will from it. It's like a well full of clean, cool water. Just come and dip your cup in whenever you need to. The idea of dedication of merit also in the Theravada tradition, there's this idea that metta doesn't work the same way with beings that have passed on, because they've moved into another form of existence. So the being that you knew and that you associated with has taken a new birth. And if you keep trying to send metta to the old person, you're not acknowledging that they've already moved on into a new process. But the idea of sharing of merit does cross that bridge, because then you're just opening it up and you're dedicating some of the goodness that you have done, you're sharing it. You're making it available. So there are some accounts of people in sort of a bardo state or in between lives, or even in like hungry ghost states, and their friends and family come to the Buddha or to teachers, and they say, "What can we do?" And the idea is to share your merit and dedicate the merit of something you do to them. So if you imagine somebody who doesn't have a body, who can't do good deeds, who realizes they've missed the boat in terms of making conditions for future happiness, if you take them to heart and you do something good and you dedicate the merit of that to them, now imagine them seeing that. It's as though they had a body to do that good act with their own two hands, because it's been done in their name. And so the accounts are like giving them a glass of cool water to drink when they're thirsty. It's like they get to delight in that moment. They'd be like, "Oh, wow, I must have done something good in my previous existence, that people are still in my name committing good works, and they can be happy." And so dedication of merit is done a lot, actually. And in some monasteries, it's even like, it's just a regular ritual whenever people are offering things. They're like, and may I give the merit to my parents who took care of me. May I dedicate the merit to my sick friends. May I dedicate the merit of this to my teachers.
Great, wonderful, thank you. And I'll take the next question. You missed my question. Should I repeat? Asks Mark. Well, actually, we scrolled on the top, which is why a few minutes ago you saw like my really expressive face going like, because I actually pressed the wrong button. I was trying to type and I cleared the screen. I thought I had closed the screen altogether. But we scrolled up and we couldn't find your question. So yes, if you can type it in, unless this is a Zen question that you're asking. Very cryptic. I don't know. But
if it includes a link, it might be getting censored. And if it also includes certain terms, so if there's any Pali words, maybe try and space out the letters or something.
Yeah, sometimes the word nibana, it censors out for who knows what reason. Hashtag Google.
Interestingly enough. And Andre is saying, this may be a difficult question, but I have never understood the Sankara aggregate. I know Sanya is the memory of images that label or are sense contacts, but Sankara is kind of confusing. Maybe this is a good question for you, Bhante, actually.
Yeah, I think one of the easiest ways to relate to Sankara is as mental activities. So mental activities of, on the coarsest level, it's thought, it's thinking. Verbal thought is the coarsest, most obvious level of Sankara. But it also includes more subtle nonverbal layers. So beneath that, we have emotional responses. We have nonverbal movements of mind, such as imagination or visualizations. And then beneath that, we have these more visceral mental activities on the level of impulses or urges, or these movements of mind. So all of that fits in the category of sankharas. Sankharas can also refer to what you might call the deeper programming of the mind, the deeper set habits, habits of responding and reacting in particular ways to particular experiences, which prior to Buddhist practice or in the early stages of our practice, we think of those things as automatic, like an automatic reaction, an automatic habitual response. But as we become more and more aware of the mind, we start to recognize that also those deeper, more subtle sankharas are also within the domain of volition, within the domain of intention. And therefore also are things that we can get some access to. So sankara is sometimes translated as volitional formations or as mental formations, and those are okay. But these days, mental activities is probably the translation that I'm liking the most. Sometimes it's translated as thought, but I feel like that's only catching the outermost layer, whereas sankhara goes much, much deeper than that. So those are my thoughts off the top of my head.
Great.
I would just briefly point out, by the way, that sankhara as one of the 5 khandhas is used somewhat differently than sankhara in other contexts. So my answer here was only sankhara as being the 4th of the 5th components of being, not sankhara as a more general term.
Thank you, Bhante. And Eleanor asks, how many years did it take from when you first got into Buddhism to when you decided to become monks, and then to when you became ordained after you decided to become one, and then to when you became ordained? After you decided to become a monk, how long it took you?
So got into Buddhism, wanted to become a monk, actually became a monk. Yeah.
Actually, before I even got into Buddhism, I actually had decided to ordain.
How does that work?
Because I remember I went to this retreat. So I guess you can say that I got into Buddhism, but I was at the experimental stage in life. I used to be a Greek type. Now I'm an aversive type. So back then I was like, let me try this out. So I went to Bhavana Society to do a 7-day retreat. And right before going to Bhavana Society, while I was researching for the retreats, I read that I could go to, or right after that retreat, anyway, around that time, before I was really into practice, I realized that there was a place in Thailand where I could go and do temporary ordination. And I thought, that's great. Like I can actually go and be a monk for a period of time and then disrobe and then keep doing whatever I want with my life. And I thought, that sounds like a great thing, on my checklist of things to do before I die, which is actually how I got into the first Buddhist monastery in the first place. So that answers your first questions. How many years? It was more how many seconds it took me to do that. But then realistically, actually, to get ordination, after I decided to become one, well, I never took temporary ordination in Thailand because shortly after that retreat where I actually met Bhante Sudbhasum, after 3 months, we started Buddhist Insights, this grassroots organization. So I had no time to go to Thailand or even to Italy, where I am originally from, for that matter, or like anywhere really other than the sort of meditation center that we put together. And yeah, so I guess it took me 2 years, 3 years.
2.5 years.
2.5 years to get ordination. But I felt like I started practicing first as a monastic in the lay form. So really practicing, precepts of renunciation and not having any kind of way out of it. Living with spiritual practitioners, also in a monastic environment. And from there, it was a sort of no choice. It was more like a continuation. It was more formalizing it, It's kind of like if you look like a duck and you quack like a duck, you're a duck. So I was like, yeah, I'm living like a monastic. I'm practicing like a monastic. I'd better become a monastic. So that's my story. And maybe Bhante Pamuto, and then we can
quack.
Good story. Was that it?
Yeah, that's a Zen answer.
Oh,
that's
okay.
a Zen. God.
So I got into Buddhism when I was 17. I started thinking about becoming a monk when I was 18. I decided I really wanted to be a monk when I was 19, and I went to the monastery at the age of 20. Your turn.
I got into Buddhism in 2016. As soon as I got into Buddhism, I wanted to be a monastic. Thought about it for a few years. Then in July of this year, I made the decision, like the firm decision, and then I ordained in August.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we're very happy.
We are.
Yeah, we need more Jamaicans in the Sangha.
So any Jamaicans, especially female Jamaicans, the monastery is getting a little too male heavy. So any female Jamaicans who want to become monastics,
just putting it out there.
There's some openings available.
Okay. Great.
I'll take that as a yes.
There's an audience here. Besides the virtual audience, there is also a physical audience in the monastery, in case you're wondering. And where is it? Bhavani is asking, Namaste. What is meant by seeing Dhamma? What's the purpose of seeing the Dhamma? Who wants to take this one?
You do.
I asked the question.
Rhetorically.
Or we could give it to the duck.
Actually, yes. Let's give it. I think this is a good question for Bhante Pramukton.
Seeing the Dhamma is understanding there is a path. Seeing the Dhamma is understanding that there is a way that we lead our lives when we don't see a way out of samsara. And it is a kind of ultimately hopeless life. We're just trying to be comfortable and satisfied. We're trying to get some kind of gratification with no end in sight. That's all we're fixated on, is just being comfortable in the moment or comfortable in some future time. But there's no idea of liberation. There's no idea of a final destination to it all. It's just cyclical. So seeing the Dhamma is realizing that there is this perpendicular way of being. There's another option, and it's an option that has a destination. It has a destination of full liberation, a liberation of heart that is unimpeachable, that you don't fall back from. It's an end of a cycle. So everything else is this cycle of pain and misery and joy and elation, followed by pain and misery. And the Dhamma is a line. You can get on this path and you can move in a straight direction, not necessarily totally linear, but you're moving in that direction. You've got your eyes on the prize. And so that's seeing the Dhamma, is basically seeing the Four Noble Truths and realizing, okay, this is out there. There is another option.
Great, thank you, Bhante. And Eleanor says, I know what you mean. I suffer from anorexia and I've had food cravings of things I have never even liked, except I can still get a croissant and I'd bring you some if I ever come to your monastery. Oh, well, I hope you will also recover from your physical and mental suffering, Eleanor. May you be happy and peaceful, and may all good things come to you. And thank you for the sweet thought of offering us croissants at the monastery. You're very sweet. And Liz said, I just started reading Buddhist teaching of totality at Bhante Sudasa's suggestion. Wow.
Advance warning, it is a dense and difficult book. So if you have questions, don't hesitate to email me.
Yeah, well, she's asking, please tell me everything about collective karma. Well, this is definitely for I think the only monastic who has read the teaching of totality, which is Bhante Sudasa.
Well, briefly speaking, there's no such thing as collective karma. That's the briefest answer. So each person is experiencing their individual karma. But it's also true that everything is interconnected and interrelated. And while we're experiencing the working out of our own karma, everyone that we encounter is also experiencing the working out of their karma. So it creates this incredibly complex web of interacting conditions where each one of us is experiencing our own past karma and creating new karma, and everybody around us is doing the same. So the concept of collective karma, as it's spoken about outside of Buddhist circles, doesn't really apply in Buddhism. In Buddhism, we mostly talk about individual karma, because that's really the only thing that we can get even the slightest grasp of. And even individual karma can be quite difficult to understand clearly. Understanding how different people's karma interacts with each other and relates with each other, that gets way too complicated, way too fast. So the Buddha says that trying to understand the full workings of karma is impossible for anyone who's not fully enlightened. Those of us who are not fully enlightened can only understand the general principles of karma. What goes up must come down, what goes around comes around, bad choices get bad results, good choices get good results, and so on. We can get the general shape of karma. But understanding how multiple threads of individual karma weave together, that's too complicated. Don't even try. Okay?
Sadhu. All right. And Melinda's asking, I have a chemical imbalance. I suffer from some mental issues. I'm on 4 types of medications. I have been pretty stable for years, but I feel my conditions are keeping me from progressing any further. Can you give me a little advice? The meds may be preventing me from going any further. Well, first of all, hello, Melinda. Much metta to you. And what comes to mind straight away after you sharing this is that sometimes it's only a problem when you make it into a problem, as Bhante Sudhaso always told me. So there are a lot of different conditions that we just have to deal with as part of having a physical body, as part of having, just being a human in the world. And we have to deal with those conditions. And so our practice shouldn't be, we don't, Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi told me several years ago that really made an impact in my mind. We don't practice despite the obstacles, but the obstacles are the path. So really working with what we have at hand. And in Western Buddhism, we tend to emphasize so much meditation. We tend to emphasize so much, the end of the Noble Eightfold Path. But actually, there's so much more that needs to be cultivated. So much more, wholesome mind states that can be cultivated no matter how, for example, the sort of medicines that we take are affecting our clarity of mind. Lately, I don't have a medical imbalance, but lately I've been suffering of a lot of different, I've had some physical sort of issues that have impacted my mind a lot. So what can I do with it? I just work with the conditions, and I can see how can the Dhamma support me in this? And it means I can perhaps in the moments where my mind is a little bit foggy, I can practice kindness towards my spiritual companions. I can practice generosity. I can practice compassion. Great opportunities to do that. I can practice right speech. And by practicing right speech, sometimes we can just be silent. That's practicing right speech. For real. These are my personal Dhamma talks that I give to myself. I'm like, right now you can actually be silent, and that's a great practice. You can practice renunciation from saying things to others when they're really coming up and they feel like very delicious. So it's only preventing you from going further, whatever your experience, whatever medical conditions you have now, it's only preventing you from going further if you allow it to prevent it to go further. If you think that is the only thing that you can practice in that moment. But there's so much to be constantly developed, nourished. So yeah, do your best and see that perhaps actually what you perceive as an obstacle is a blessing in disguise, because it's giving you the opportunity to really cultivate what really needs to be cultivated in this moment, rather than what naturally comes more comfortable to you. Perhaps studying comes more comfortable to you, or perhaps sharp samadhi is what really is delicious. So you want to cultivate that more and more. And we tend to follow then our aspirations and overlook all the things that we actually perhaps should care a little bit more. So water those seeds, water those plants, and see what is currently feasible. This is what comes to mind. Anything else that my spiritual companions want to share?
That's great.
All right. And Mark says, is there anything in the suttas that pertains to the famous phrase, sudden awakening, slow enlightenment? Can someone experience nibana briefly, awaken, but take time for full enlightenment? And I'll pass this on to Bhante Sudasa.
So, what mostly in suttas, mostly the Buddha talks about gradual practice, gradual progress, gradual development. It's mostly what he talks about. But there's also a number of places in the suttas where people do have sudden awakening experiences, normally while listening to Dhamma talks. It's interesting that the recordings of sudden awakening in the suttas are almost never anything to do with meditation. They're almost always while someone is either listening to a Dhamma talk or engaging in a discussion about the Dhamma. That there's some kind of sudden breakthrough in their perception of reality. But as far as having a breakthrough, which is not full enlightenment, but some kind of breakthrough, which then one needs to gradually deepen over a long period of time, that's actually relatively common. It's relatively common that our practice is actually not this perfectly even slope which gradually goes up and up and up and up and up and up and up, but rather it's often like it's going up and then there's this sudden sharp increase, like there's some shift in how we're viewing our practice, there's some shift in how we're viewing the world, and then it goes back to being slow progress, and then it plateaus, and sometimes it plateaus for a long time, and then there's another like sudden growth spurt, and then maybe it goes back to gradual. So it's not quite so easily predictable. But yeah, there are definitely accounts of people who have sudden breakthroughs, but it's partial. I wouldn't say to the point of seeing nibana, but having some deeper glimpse of impermanence, for example. Every now and then, somebody gets a deep glimpse of impermanence. And it's not necessarily to the point of stream entry even, but it really shakes their view of what they think the world is. But then after the experience, they're like, well, but the world still seems to be pretty much the same. And then it's back to the gradual practice, the gradual progress, but with some understanding that reality is not quite what they used to think it was, that there is some real bedrock, hard reality to what the Buddha was talking about. So those are very faith-building experiences, which then fuels our gradual practice. So that's from the Theravada perspective, but also in the Mahayana perspective, they talk about gradual practice and sudden awakening as being like two sides of one coin. It might look like different or even contrary perspectives, but actually they're mutually supportive and they work together. The gradual practice is what makes the sudden awakenings possible. And the sudden awakening is what gives fuel and vigor to our gradual practice. So they're not seen as two separate things. So this is one of the long-standing debates in the Chan tradition for centuries, actually, was the whole gradual practice for sudden awakening. And it finally wound up with the two schools coming together and agreeing that they were actually talking about the same thing, deciding that there actually wasn't a conflict. The conflict was only on the level of words, but not on the level of meaning or experience. So those are my thoughts on the matter.
Great. Thank you so much, Bhante. And Eleanor asks, who are those two dolls from the monk chat photo on YouTube? Oh, well, long story short, so Bante and I took a trip to Thailand in February. And one of our lay friends, supporters who was traveling with us, Luciana, donated those two dolls to Bante and I at the airport while we were traveling with them, because she thought that they were just like the two of us. So one has glasses and one had a hat. So it was basically looking like him and me with the hat. And at the very beginning of monk chat, it was just the two of us doing monk chat because we were the only resident monastics. And so that's how that picture became the monk chat photo. Now we should update it. There should be more.
We don't need more dolls. We do not need more dolls.
Well, actually, we could use the little row of the little Burmese monk statues.
Oh, yeah. That's right. Yes, we can. We have more. We have other dolls
coming soon, and it was your idea.
More dolls.
Yes, more dolls coming soon. And Sienna, good to see you. Hello, I love your YouTube nickname, DJ Sienna Chanel. Is asking, where does one start when becoming a Buddhist to begin with? Where do you start? Because I feel like I've been searching with no destination. So how does one become a practicing Buddhist? Well, you can come here, by the way. It's also very close to your home. You don't have to travel that far.
Yeah, just come hang out with us, practice with us, talk with us. That actually helps tremendously, to be perfectly honest. One of the best ways to really become a practicing Buddhist is to spend time with other practicing Buddhists.
Yeah. Yeah. No need to search. You already have the destination. 29 Ridgeway Avenue, West Orange, New Jersey. Empty Cloud Monastery. We're here. Constantly waiting for you. Going like, oh, where's Sienna? Is she here yet? Better show up tomorrow. Come tomorrow. And Andre says, is there a way to observe the sankharas as they arise and cease? I know they arise and cease so fast that it's hard to see them. In this case, I can see why a high level of samadhi is necessary. And I think this is a follow-up to the question that he asked you ahead of beforehand. So maybe.
You're observing them arise and cease all the time. So this idea that you need to have a high level of samadhi is actually not true. Having a high level of samadhi helps you see more and more refined sankharas and to catch more and more of them. But actually every moment is a sankhara arising and ceasing. A simple way of relating to this is the analogy of a movie. A movie looks like a continual image, a continual moving image, but actually it's a series of individual images, which happens so quickly that it looks like a single moving image. But we actually know that's not the case. We know it's not a moving image. We know it's a series of individual images. So in the same way, we think that there are objects moving through reality, but actually it's a series of sankharas arising and ceasing. So you're seeing sankharas arise and cease all the time. Just start looking at your experience in that way. Look at your experience in terms of sankharas arising and ceasing, and you'll realize it's always been right in front of your eyes. It's always been right in front of your mind. It's never been anywhere else. So of course, having good samadhi is helpful, but it's not a requirement. You can see it all the time.
Okay, thank you, Bante. And Melinda says, we need more Blacks into Buddhism to heal. I think that Melinda is part of the support team in looking for more Jamaicans to join the Sangha.
For those who don't know, we happen to have a Jamaican laywoman staying here. Her name's Antoinette, and she's going to become a monk, even though she's resisting it. Everybody knows it's true. It's just a matter of time.
Even
she's
nodding.
Even right now, she's nodding, so she knows it's true.
Yeah. I mean, like we have live requests, like right now, popping. So Andrew says, Sadhu to all of you for donning the robes, and I wish for all of your swift progress to enlightenment. Oh, sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you. And you as well, may you swiftly attain enlightenment. And Gita asks, can you explain how Sankara leads to Vijnana? Who would like to take this question?
Well, I want to take this one, but I'm kind of hogging all the Sankara questions. Also, Andre asked basically the same question here, so we can answer them together.
Perfect. I mean, I'll skip, so...
Though if somebody else really wants to answer this one, I can pass.
Bhante Sumno actually talked about Sankaras this last weekend.
Oh, I did. But I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, so first off, I should just point out that there's a number of different opinions on this. So my opinion is one, but there are others. But briefly, avijja, ignorance. Fundamentally, it's ignorance of what? It's ignorance of anatta, ignorance of not self. So from that fundamental ignorance, we think I exist, and that therefore there are other things that exist. So this is that basic division of sankharas. This is sankhara in its general sense of meaning separate conditional phenomena, separate objects, separate things. So this is its broader sense, not its sense in terms of the five khandhas. So we think there's me, therefore there are other things, therefore there are things, there are sankharas. So in this way, the experience of sankhara arises from the delusion of self-existence. It arises from that fundamental ignorance of not self. And then from that comes consciousness, because I am conscious of those other things. This thing that is me is conscious of the other things that are not me. So from sankhara, there's consciousness. And what is the me that is conscious of those other things? This me is this body and mind. That's nama rupa. So in this way, avijja paccaya sankhara, sankhara paccaya vijnana, vijnana paccaya nama rupa. There's a brief explanation.
Great, thank you, Bhante. And well, I think you.
Yes.
You
So,
answered that. So Gita is asking, Bhante Raya, is there a universal wholesome energy that we connect to in meditation? Maybe Bhante Sumano can answer that.
Sure. I would say the wholesome energy that you connect to in meditation is the one that you generate yourself. So when you're doing a practice, even something as simple as loving kindness, compassion, appreciation, joy, etc., you're giving rise to wholesome mind states, and that is nourishing in meditation. So already, you don't have to look anywhere necessarily for an energy to connect to, but just seeing what's already there in a lot of cases, and then also sort of encouraging it to come up. While you're meditating, you might also be more sort of receptive to other people who are radiating metta or what have you. But if you're talking about universal wholesome energy in sort of this metaphysical sense, then I would be cautious a little bit because, there are lots of things happening in the world that we may not be aware of, but it's not necessarily something that we have to seek out one way or another. So I would just focus on what you can do. And if there's other people around you or other beings that are sort of sending you thoughts of kindness and compassion and you pick up on it, then that's also great.
I can maybe, keep that going. So the idea in Buddhism is there's no universal constant just floating out there. It's the good actions that are done. It's wisdom that is this universal good energy. So it's the actual beings who are practicing the Dhamma that are generating that good energy. And so the understanding of metta is understanding a boundless state, is understanding that the mind is capable of being aware of things without having to worry about time and space. So you can actually tap into the fact that other people are practicing at this moment, and that that would be an energy you can always tap into. And this is like Sila Nusati or Deva Nusati, Even Buddhanusati is understanding we are living in the dispensation, the aftermath of a Buddha having entered this world. So all of these are energies that you can tap into, and it's not some strange, impersonal, super good vibes out there, but it's the energy of living beings practicing this Dhamma and waking up to it that you're connecting with.
Great. Thank you, Bantes. And hello, Kevin. Good to see you. Welcome to Monk Chat. And Gita is asking, is the element of Nibbana described in the suttas, Bante? I think this is a good question for you because you really like talking about it. Also, you haven't seen him in 2 weeks, so I think it's good that Bante Suddazo shares.
They always give me the hard questions. Briefly, yes. The Nibbana Dhatu is mentioned in many places in the suttas. It's described in many different ways, using many different words. One of the simplest ways it's described is it's equated with the asankata dhatu, the element of the unconditioned, the element of that which is not describable in terms of conditions, which cannot be described in terms of existence or non-existence. So the Nibbana Dhatu is the asankata dhatu, which from one perspective, it's all pervasive. It permeates everything. It's not separate from everything. But on the other hand, it can't be defined in terms of things. So the Nibbana Dhatu is, again, it's described in many, many different ways in the suttas. Actually, a great book to read on the subject is called The Island. It's a book by my preceptor, Ajahn Pasano, and also by Ajahn Amaro. They put together a bunch of sutta quotes describing Nibbana in various ways, and mixed in a lot of teachings from various contemporary teachers of different Buddhist traditions, Theravada and Mahayana, giving a variety of perspectives on the Nibbana Dhatu and how to understand it. So that's a great book if you really want to learn more about Nibbana. Another really good one by Bhante Katukurunde Nyanananda. It's called Nibbana, the Mind Stilled. That's another actually quite thick book, which goes into exquisite detail on the nature of the Nibbana Dhatu. I think it's out of print, but it's a free book, so you can get it print on demand. Okay.
Great, thank you. And Andy says, thank you for devoting time to us teachers. I have some experience meditating on pleasure and pain. But in daily life, I find that I often have strong aversion to cold and clinging to heat. Advice on how to lessen both? I have some experience meditating on pleasure and pain, but in daily life, I find that I often have strong aversion to cold and clinging to heat. Advice on how to lessen both? This is for you.
Yeah, he's definitely the right guy for that.
Yes.
Yeah, there's some preparation for a camping trip. And so I was just sorting through a shelf and this emergency foil blanket showed up. And I'm like, oh, these are great. I use these all the time when I was out wandering. And everybody's looking at me like I'm crazy. And I'm trying to explain to Aya the 3 different modes of heat transfer. And she's like, voodoo, sorcery, you're a sorceress. And I'm like, what? Hag, witchcraft. I'm like, it's aluminum foil. You know how this works, Aya. But the reality is many of us don't know how this works. And so when we talk about the meditation on the elements, what we're doing is starting to pierce a very thick ignorance that we have about the nature of the elements that compose our physical existence. So many of us have deep ignorance and clinging around the heat element, the fire element, the tejo dhatu, without knowing it, simply because we have never applied our mind to thinking about it in that way. So right now, the tejo dhatu is in every cell of our body. We are immersed in the tejo dhatu. What is the temperature of the room right now? And is it constant or is it changing? So is the air moving around you? And is the temperature of your body different from the temperature of the surface you're in contact with? And so these are two modes of heat transfer. So the convection of surface of the air moving across you, or water moving across you that moves heat with it. And then there's conduction. Two surfaces in contact with each other transfer heat. It's a natural process. Everything in the universe is trying to find this equilibrium. But then there's a third one. So is there anything in your room which is cold, like an open window, or I don't know, an open refrigerator or something, a cold water pipe, a cold glass? Many people don't realize they're radiating heat towards that object because their body is hotter than that object, and the universe is trying to seek equilibrium. That's the third mode of transfer, is radiation. And there's here in the area of New York City, there are many forms of heat aren't forced air like they are out west in newer installations where people had lots of energy and lots of space, so they would push hot air through their house. Instead, you have radiators. You have hot water moving through a pipe, and that pipe gets hot, and then everything in the room is getting radiant energy. So there's actually a lot going on with the heat element. And if we say, oh, I'm just averse to being cold, the reality is we haven't yet explored what cold means to us. Now, the people die of exposure when they're out in the wilderness. And exposure means simply that they didn't protect themselves from radiating their heat out in all directions, because at night things get cold. If you understand you need to have something protecting you from the open air, then you will just bleed all your heat out. But many people also catch a cold if they don't heat up their house properly, simply because they don't understand that everything they touch along the way is cold. Their feet on the floor, we become insensitive to our feet. We don't realize every time we put our foot down, we have to warm up that spot of floor. We do it with the heat that's in our body. It goes into the floor. So all of this is going on. So I encourage exploring this. You start with getting comfortable and understanding, why you're comfortable. What are the conditions for that? What level of heat is comfortable for you? And then start exploring, okay, what am I in contact with? What's flowing past me? What am I radiating towards? And seeing where discomfort arises and where comfort is maintained. If you have a single wool sweatshirt on, can you be okay in a variety of environments? Well, then you can go into an environment that previously you thought was too cold for you, and you find that you're okay. It's just about managing and understanding, and with that we let go of the fear and ignorance around the heat element, and we realize it's just an element. It can be known, it can be controlled, it can be understood, and it can be let go of. So I've actually studied the heat element a lot.
Great, wonderful. Thank you, Bante. And Bhavani is asking, which sutta can help me to see the Dhamma? How to train the mind to see the Dhamma? Well, all the suttas can help you see the Dhamma. And how to train the mind to see the Dhamma? Well, practice what you read. Well, practice the instructions of the Buddha. So it's not by reading the suttas that it's not the simple act of reading that gets us to any type of sort of realization, but it's to actually contemplate the suttas, understand them experientially, practicing the Dhamma. It's not something that we need to believe, something that we need to do. And that is what propels us towards awakening. And you can see the Dhamma. Otherwise, we keep on going about the world with, oh, there is suffering. Oh, yeah, sure, there is suffering. And then, bam, we experience suffering, slap in the face. And we keep on, deluding ourselves, creating bubbles, over bubbles, over bubbles, over bubbles. We become the master bubble makers. And and our bubble keeps getting pierced, and we're so shocked about about the about just existing in this world. While if we actually practice in accordance to Dhamma, so really contemplating, really understanding the three characteristics, understanding suffering, understanding impermanence, understanding non-self, then we realize Dhamma and we see the Dhamma for ourselves. So that's my thought on the matter. And Maitreya T says, sometimes I experience anxiety and worry while meditating. I focus on my breathing, but it gets worse. How do I deal with this problem? Anybody wants to pick the...
I was going to say just first, I've heard
Yep.
one teacher found a student in this case, and the more they meditated, the more anxious they got, and they said, "Oh, there's no anicca sanya. There's no flow in the mind." It's just a thought.
Well, one thing I would just say is, you say it gets worse when you focus on your breathing. Well, then don't focus on your breathing. I had this problem quite a bit the early years of my practice. And actually, I went to Ajahn Amaro and spoke to him about this. I was like, well, when I meditate on my breathing, I get anxious. And he's like, well, then don't meditate on your breathing. And I was like, oh. He's like, yeah, just do something else. And I'm like, oh. And so I did something else, and the problem went away. So I would just say, don't do breath meditation. Do other meditation methods. And you might find that it's just not a problem. Breath meditation is not for everyone. One thing I might recommend is loving kindness meditation. It's impossible to feel anxious when the mind is filled with metta.
Great, thank you, Bante. And hello, Jana, welcome, good to see you. And Kevin is asking, on Kamma, the Buddha got gravely sick toward the end of his life. This century, I believe, from bad rabbit or pork. How is that not Kamma? Wasn't the Buddha free from all Kamma? Anyone wants to volunteer?
Of course that was Kamma.
Oh, I mean, yeah, it's Kamma Vipaka.
Yes, correct.
So it's the resultant of Kamma. And even if you get full enlightenment, even if you get fully enlightened as a Buddha, you're still going to be receiving the effects of past actions. That actually works out in our favor, because if you just winked out of existence the moment you got fully enlightened, there would be no Buddha teaching the Dhamma. So his past action, his past vipaka, was still in effect. And that's why he continued to have a body here on our planet for the next 45 years. So it wasn't all bad, but some of it was not pleasant, and some of it was ultimately fatal.
Great. And Andre is asking, have you ever sat all night without uncrossing your legs? We can go from here to here, or from here to here.
Last night we stayed until midnight. So this is we're reliving a beloved practice from our early days back in California, and it's really delightful. And when I first started that practice, I really hated it and resisted it, and thought it was stupid, and tried to find every excuse I could to sit in a comfy chair, to lie down and stretch my back. But eventually I grew to just really enjoy, especially the period up until midnight. After midnight, my posture became awful, and it became like damaging to the body to kind of sit slumped. So that wasn't so good. But up until midnight, I really enjoy just sitting and being with the body. And my knees are giving me a bit of trouble post Lyme disease, but I do really look forward to that. But I think it also it's about conditions. So you kind of condition the body to be okay with long periods of stillness, so that your posture will stay upright. You won't hurt yourself. And then when it comes, and it's a delightful thing, because then you can just forget about the body. You can just be there with an experience for a long period of time. So no, I haven't done it, but I'm still conditioning my body to do it.
And Andre is also adding, I ask because I've heard stories where some monks have meditated all night without uncrossing their legs, and that was a well worth practice for them. For him, he recommends not doing it more than one day in a row. So personally, I have not done an all-nighter. The longest I have done is stretches of 3 hours. Not that often. And it's an interesting experience, but yeah, I guess I'll end it with that.
Yeah, I used to do periods of 4 to 5 hours fairly often. I haven't done it much in the last few years. It can be a very worthwhile experience. And I would say that if you've never done a really long period of sitting meditation before, then try. Maybe start with 2 hours. If the most you've ever done was an hour, then try 2 hours. And that will already be a pretty big leap. But eventually you'll discover that it's all in the mind. It has nothing to do with the body, it's all in the mind. And then you can try 3 hours or 4 hours. Beyond 4 hours is a little bit dodgy. I'm not really sure how much benefit there is beyond 4 hours. So I actually got a lot of benefit from doing 4.5, 5 hour long periods of sitting meditation. But I think I learned the lesson from that, and I don't need to keep doing it. Rather, what I learned once again that pain is in the mind. And I learned that the body is perfectly capable of sitting still for hours at a time, without pain and without damage. As Bhante Pumoto said, it's important to have decent posture, otherwise you can hurt your body. So that is very important. Sit with good posture if you're going to do a long period of sitting. As far as sitting all night, so that's a practice which, at the monastery Bhante Pumoto and I were trained at, that was a standard practice that we would do once a week, is to meditate all night. But during that time, normally you would alternate between sitting and walking meditation. And one reason for that is because that promotes alertness of mind. If you're only doing all sitting all night long, then the mind tends to become very dull and drowsy and hazy, which is not helpful. But if you're alternating sitting and walking, then that helps to keep the mind sharp and alert. So that's also a useful practice to do once in a while, but again, not too often. But also, I would look at this attitude, because sometimes we get very macho in our approach to practice. And that's not necessarily beneficial. It's not necessarily helpful. Rather, it's looking at a steady development of our practice. And sometimes it is good to push ourselves far beyond what we think our limits are. Because the truth is, our limits are actually way, way beyond what we think. We think our limit is 1 hour, but it's actually 5. So sometimes it's good to really push ourselves and prove to ourselves that our limits are far beyond what we think. But to be realistic about ourselves, is it beneficial, or is it just making ourselves miserable? Is it actually helping us, or is it just causing us a lot of pain? Are we learning anything from the experience? It's good to be realistic. Those are my thoughts.
Okay, and this one.
I haven't.
Okay.
Very zen answer. All right. And my Treya T is asking, why do we experience anxiety and worry during meditation? Very simple. Actually, it's what we've also been talking about just a few moments ago about Kama and Vipaka. So it's results of previous actions that don't necessarily have to even be from past lives. It can be just moments before, or hours before, or days before, or years before. So it's what I find very amusing, actually, also reflecting on my personal mind, is how absurd our expectations are. It's kind of like if we, keep on planting tomato seeds and then we expect orange trees to come up. We're like, wait, why don't I have an orange tree? Why don't I have like a whole field of orange trees? That's because we've planted tomato seeds. So we get tomato plants. So that's what we learn with Buddhist practice. We learn what to plant intentionally and what kind of results we're going to get. So I really liked, actually, Venerable Dream Eye's sort of little snippet quote. She's a Tibetan monastic, and she said, "You cannot control the consequences, but you can control the causes." So it doesn't really matter why you're experiencing right now anxiety and and worry, but rather it's what are you doing in this moment? What are you seeding? What are you putting in? What are the conditions that you're creating for happiness to arise in the future? So whatever, it's currently present, you're already did the planting. You're just harvesting. So what we want to do is plant new things, plant new growth, plant the seeds of mindfulness, the seeds of calm, the seeds of peacefulness in the mind. And most importantly, actually cultivate sila, cultivate wholesome actions. Once we had this wonderful monk from India. Do you remember his name? He came to give a talk on anxiety. And we had all the room packed with all these people from New York who all suffer anxiety. Living in New York City, comes with the rent kind of thing. And they were all expecting a whole sort of exercise book, like recipes from a diet all the way to exercises to do in the morning. And his entire talk was all about be a good person, practice generosity, practice kindness, practice wholesomeness, because that is basically planting the seeds for happiness, for peacefulness. You're actually going at the root of it rather than putting a patch on it. You're not doing something about it. You're preventing it from happening to begin with. And I still remember I was so impressed by his words because it was pure Dhamma. It was incredible. So yeah, that's what I have to share on the matter.
Oh, can I share something?
Yeah, sure.
So as far as why it might arise in meditation, also I found that during daily life, we ignore a lot of our experience. So the things that may actually be happening all the time, we don't really pay much attention to just because we're busy doing whatever it is that we're doing. So you might see certain things come up in meditation because the mind is more still. The mind isn't scattered and all over the place. So those things that we've been ignoring for days, weeks, months, years, decades, they start to pop up. That can be very unsettling because it's like, whoa, where did this come from? But we see that, or at least we can understand that those things have sort of been there the whole time, sometimes bubbling up. Now, as far as anxiety and worry, I would also say that if anxiety and worry are arising, that sometimes it's because we're worried and anxious about certain things. And so, especially in 2020, there's seemingly thousands of things to be anxious and worried about. Am I going to die from a pandemic that slowly destroys my body from the inside out? Am I going to have to live through a civil war or a struggle for power, a coup, economic destruction, climate change?
Yeah, I'm starting to feel it.
Flooding.
You might be making things worse.
Well, the point is that there are things in the world that are going to affect us in a catastrophic way, and there's no way.
Doom and gloom insights. Welcome to
Yeah.
Buddhism.
I mean, even the best case scenario, you're going to get old, decrepit, sick, and die. So there's no way to get around these things. This is reality. But we get anxious and worried because there's a part of us that thinks things shouldn't be this way, that we shouldn't have to go through this, that things should be different. But if we look at the history of the world, actually, this is quite normal. What's abnormal is that we can like sit in a monastery and be relatively, free from the worry that someone's going to break in and try to kill us and steal everything we have. We don't really have that much to begin with. But as far as the history of the world is concerned, these times are pretty safe, pretty stable, pretty predictable. And yet, there's obviously tons of issues. But when you look at the mind and really see, well, why am I feeling worried and anxious about these things? Then I find that it always goes back to this way that we view the world, really just the three characteristics. We think things will stay the same. And we think things will stay the same in a way that we like, that will be pleasurable and satisfying. And then if things are that way, then we feel as a person, as a human being, as whatever, that we'll be happy. We put our self-worth, our self-identity, and our happiness in these things, but we're just setting ourselves up for failure. So naturally, we're going to get anxious and worried when things happen that sort of chip away at that image, but the image is false. So really cultivating this sort of strong, unflinching, really desire to see reality for what it is, no matter how painful. And once we stop ignoring that things suck right now, but also recognize that that's the nature of the world, then we don't have to be so worried and anxious about it because it's normal. Then, instead of being worried and anxious, we can be like, okay, well, this sucks. Well, what can I do about it? Instead of expecting it to be different, what can I actually do for myself and others that will help, that will alleviate the suckiness of it? And then ultimately, too, with Buddhist practice, how to not have to suffer when we see that the world sucks and it will never be any other way.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And Mark is asking, what are your current visiting hours and rules? Well, we don't really have visiting hours, but we have visiting hours by request. So you can send an email at info@emptycloud.org and arrange a visit. So we can make sure that all the COVID guidelines are in place and that everybody's safe while meeting with the monastics. And John says, do you think the Huayan doctrines complement Theravada teachings? How can the Huayan teachings be practiced? And this is a question for Bhante Sudaso.
So do Huayan doctrines complement Theravada? Absolutely, yes. How can they? So actually, just briefly to say on that, I would say that my understanding of impermanence in particular was dramatically improved. Also, my understanding of the asankata dhatu. I never really understood what the heck asankata dhatu meant until studying the Huayan teachings. So I found it incredibly helpful for getting a deeper understanding of what nibana dhatu, asankata dhatu, what the unformed, the unconditioned, just what's that? What's it talking about? And how are they practiced? Well, actually, anicca sanya. Anicca sanya is the key. Anicca sanya combined with an intellectual understanding of Huayan teachings will give you a deep understanding of it. Yeah. And Sunyata Sanya, so practicing Sunyata Samadhi, this direct immersion of the mind in the experience of emptiness. But for that to be possible, you have to understand what emptiness is. And to understand what emptiness is, it helps to study the Huayan teachings, which is why you should read the Buddhist teachings on totality, which is basically just a summary book of Huayan doctrine.
All right. Thank you, Bante. And Bhavani is asking, how good is standing meditation? Perhaps Bante Pamuto can give a Yelp review.
It's great.
Okay, great. That was easy.
And Eleanor is asking, where can we learn more about Buddhist insights? When it was formed, a typical day there, how many monks lives there? I can't find a lot of information about that on your website. Oops, we need to update it. It's a little bit out of date. So we're working on the update of the website. So eventually you will be able to read it there. It will happen hopefully sooner rather than later. But I'll tell you one thing. We use here monks as gender neutral. So we formally don't have any nuns, even though you put monks and nuns. So we're all monks. Just some happen to be female and some happen to be male.
More female monks coming.
Yeah. Perhaps from Jamaica too.
Possibly also some former DJs.
Ooh, yes. And Andre says, another question. Have you ever tried to contemplate unpleasant feelings? Usually we contemplate on painful feeling like anger, sadness, but pleasant feelings are the same nature. We want to be free from painful feeling, but it should be equally possible to contemplate unpleasant feelings to understand their nature. Well, I would like to just clarify that normally in Buddhism, when we talk about feelings, so Vedana, we're not really talking about anger, sadness, etc., but rather the feeling, so not the emotion. It's not a pleasant emotion, unpleasant emotion, neither pleasant or unpleasant emotion, but rather what is the sensation. So we get angry, and what kind of physical sensation do we get? Do we get a pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral feeling? Hopefully you're saying, so it will be unpleasant. If it's pleasant, then I recommend going to a therapist, possibly a psychiatrist. And then once that is cleared and you're at the stage of unpleasant feeling, then as Bhante Sujato says, Buddhism starts when psychology ends. And that's where we start focusing on on understanding pleasant and unpleasant feeling. And that's when you can contemplate, both unpleasant feeling actually is very useful because it's just something unavoidable, especially in meditation when there is not much going on. It's usually something that the mind gravitates towards. So if your leg is starting to kill you, like literally, in the way that you're perceiving it, literally, that is killing you. In reality, it's not. But I mean, unless you have already a pre-existing condition, then in that case, it might. Bhante Sudazo is kindly pointing to the time. Anyway, now you distracted me.
So long story short, yes, you can contemplate pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. The Buddha says we should contemplate all three. So yes, pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. So it's almost 9 o'clock.
It's actually still 2 minutes.
It's 8:58.
All right. Anyway.
Short story short, short story even shorter.
We didn't sleep that much last night.
That's why he's in a rush. It was the long meditation that Bhante Pamuto was talking about.
It was so nice. And this morning, the mind was so serene. It was like day and night. Don't matter. There's just this steady flow. She's pointing at the clock.
You have 2
Before he
minutes
does
to
it.
answer about the flower ornament.
Can Bhante Sudhasu give a teaching on the Flower Ornament Sutra? That would be cool.
So I once asked Thich Hai to do exactly that, to give a teaching on the Huayan Sutra. And his answer was, do you have a month? So the Huayan Sutra is really, really, really long. So no, I'm not going to give a talk on it, but maybe in a few years I'll give like a month-long lecture series on it.
Wow.
That would be great.
But not anytime soon.
So coming soon, soonish, teachings on the Flower Ornament Sutra. All right, and that's all for this evening. Thank you all for joining us and asking lots of questions. And thanks to all the venerables for spending time. And thanks to Ajahn Stan for keeping my legs warm during the entire hour and a half. You saw a few cameos of him.
Conduction.
Yeah.
And thanks
Witchcraft.
to our friends here, residents at the monastery. We're always happy to share space with you. All right, so we'll see you next Wednesday for sutta study in the morning and talks in the evening. So you can, every Wednesday to Friday, you can join us online at 8 a.m. New York City time and 7:30 p.m. New York City time. And if you live close by at the monastery, you can also join us at 3 p.m. on the lawn at Empty Cloud every Saturday to meditate with us and hear words of Dhamma and ask questions live. And this Sunday, we're also having a volunteer day where we need lots of hands to get some things done. Lots of things, not some. So please come if you can. We'll be here the whole day, so you can come for part of the day, the entire day, and also spend time here for lunch if you feel inclined to. And next weekend, we'll have the Katina ceremony.
Yeah, next Sunday.
Yeah, it will be outdoors as well. So if you want to join us, reach out via email and we'll give you all the information. All right, we can end with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Have a great rest of the day.